Here, here. The teams in this round, an opening proposition is Ljubljana A. In opening opposition, IIU Malaysia B. Erasmus A. And in closing op, we have Galatasaray. Your timekeeper is sitting to my immediate right. She will give you all signals. Your judges are in these first two rows. And without further ado, I call this House to order and call upon the Honorable Prime Minister to present the motion that stands in his or her name. Hear, hear.
Welcome to the sex slave quarterfinals, everyone. Here is what this House would do. This House would ban any scheme intended to cure homosexuality. Here are our assumptions. This is what we feel we do not have to prove. If the opposition contests that, we will argue it. We believe we're facing a time where being gay is becoming normalized. We think that's a good thing. We think there's nothing wrong with being gay, and we think that it is extremely bad to keep on discriminating gay people, and those practices that discriminate gays are bad. This is what we believe. What do we propose? We propose that no institution, group of individuals, anyone can have a program that intends to cure gayness. What we mean by that, there should be no practices that try to cure being gay. There should be no advertising of such a practice. There should be no internal documents of those institutions that they intend to cure gays, which means no constitutions, no documents, no nothing. We will hold these people criminally liable. We believe we do not have the burden to give you how many years of sentence we're going to give them. We believe that differs from the different legal system in different countries. Of course, we're setting this debate up in Western liberal democracies. We think that's a fair point. Now, what are we going to propose? What are we going to argue? We're going to show you that this time the state has the right to limit the right of institutions to execute certain practices. We're going to show you that this sends a message, and not only that it sends the message, but that this message has an extremely bad impact on the gay community and on the rest of the population. We're going to examine how this works on the individual, and we'll show you that we should definitely ban this. Before we go into this argumentation, try.
By banning this, are you going to cure the people's mind thinking that gayness is not normal? Are they going to change broaden their horizon and say, okay, gay
Yes,
is normal?
yes, we think that this is a consequence, and if you would have had the patience to listen to that, you wouldn't waste the point, because this is what we're arguing. So why does the state have the right to limit the freedom of these institutions? We believe this happens all the time. We believe we have the right, and the state has the responsibility to limit the freedom of certain practices when we can prove that there's a certain harm involved in that. When do we do that? Already, and we think that's legitimate. We ban hate speech because we think that it instigates violence, because we're too afraid that people will go and instigate and induce violence on other people because of arbitrary distinctions that the hate speaker makes. We ban video games. We think that's a good idea. We bring the example of Postal 2, which was banned in most Western liberal democracies. It was an extremely violent game where you were able to rape hookers, bash heads off with a shovel, even rape cats, or put them on a gun in order to use them as a silencer. We think these practices are extremely bad or extremely harmful, and we think we should ban them. No, thank you. We banned the depiction of black people in the civil rights movement that harmed them, that kept on discriminating them. As soon as we were trying to fight discrimination of a certain groups, we accepted the fact, no thank you, that these depictions create the sentiment in our society that keeps on perpetuating this discrimination, and we ban those. We think that's a good thing. We think it's moral to keep certain groups that are discriminated and that have done nothing wrong protected. We would like to protect gay people because they're extremely cool and they should have a free sexuality. No. What message does this send? We on Team Government believe that language and practices create the reality we live in. They create it by the way people start thinking. No thank you. Because this a distinction between an action and an inaction is completely arbitrary, because all action comes from a certain mindset. We think about something, we think about it in a certain way, and we act from that. We believe that when people think that gayness, being gay, is bad, or is a disease, or should be cured, they act in this way towards the gay population and even towards themselves. What message do these practices send? We think they send the message that being gay is a disease, which we disprove, because being gay is not a disease. Even the World Health Organization, about 30 years ago, removed being gay from their list of diseases. We think we should follow the scientific communities because these are the smartest people on the planet, and if the opposition wants to contest that, they have to show us that being gay is a disease. We think that this spreads this rhetoric which discriminates gay people, and that's extremely bad. We think that it spreads the rhetoric that this is a curable thing, that you can actually solve it, which we're willing to dispute. Because we believe that you being gay isn't something that A, should be considered in terms of being curable or non-curable. Secondly, we say that it is not curable to the fact that there's no disease here. It's a simple matter of where you stick your penis. There is nothing sick about that, and we believe that just because two consensual men decided to use their penises with one another, or two consensual females use their sexual organs in a certain way, they should not be discriminated in any case, and each and every practice that spreads that kind of rhetoric should be banned. Go.
Look, we concede the idea that the state should treat individuals equally, but the private agencies don't have the obligation to treat everyone equally and be friends with everyone.
The private agencies have the obligation not to discriminate individuals and groups in our society. We've established that. We have that precedent set in our legal system, in our moral system, and we believe that should be always done. If the opposition wants to win this debate, they have to show us why discriminating someone from an institution is an inherent right that should never be violated. What the opposition has to say is that it's a desirable effect for a certain group to look down on people, to discriminate them, and to present them in a bad manner. We think that this presents the message that curing is a desired effect, which leaves consequences on the individual. We believe the individual is only worse, because the main problem with being gay is you don't know how the society is going to accept you. You're afraid to come out of the closet. The moment you see propaganda and institutions that tell you that this is a disease and that this is a curable thing, you're less likely to engage in your sexuality, and the state therefore supports an institutions that diminishes your pleasure, that harms no one. We think that's extremely bad. We believe that families have a much higher authority in forcing these individuals not to come out of the closet and not to practice their sexuality, because they have these institutions that they force them to send into. Furthermore, we believe that these individuals not only will reveal themselves, but in these institutions are harmed, because we've got trained psychiatrists that for money or whatever reasons prescribe too high doses of antidepressants to these people, because the institution itself creates this depressive feeling in that person, because it keeps on telling them that there's something wrong with them. And because of these simple facts, because the state has the obligation, because we want to diminish discrimination and the message outside, and because it harms the individuals who are gay or think about being openly gay, we beg you to propose. Thank you.
I thank that speaker and invite the first speaker on opening opposition to begin the round for her personally.
Mr. Speaker, we agree that being homosexual is becoming normalized within society, and discrimination against these individuals is bad. Surprising, coming from International Islamic University, Malaysia. We agree to this, and we will tell you exactly where we're drawing the line. We think governments draw the lines when these groups move to forcibly curb on fundamental freedoms. That means if they go into your room, kidnap a poor homosexual boy and try to beat the homosexuality out of him, that's where we stop these groups from happening. That's where we stop these groups from actually occurring within status quo, when they actually cause harm onto individuals. We don't think the kind of harms that they were talking about are inherently attached to the existence or the mere existence of these groups itself. We think government has an active role, Mr. Speaker, to allow these groups to to actually exist within society. We think a government bans something when firstly there exists excessive and disproportionate harm that we cannot mitigate within society, something they haven't proved. We think a bad government bans something where there exists no utility or significant benefit from certain actions, something they haven't proved either, or something is against social norms and accepted practices. Our positive material will be circulating around these lines, but we'll first tell you a few points of rebuttal. They say this: the state has the right to curb on things when harm occurs. We agree to this very well, but they never showed us, Mr. Speaker, how the kind of harm that they were talking about were analogous to these groups in the first place, mainly because there was no characterization of what these groups are. We think these groups are no different, Mr. Speaker, from, say, religious organizations which occur or which exist within society, which preach certain beliefs and tries to convert you into adopting, Mr. Speaker, our beliefs. We think this is a legitimate form of expression, Mr. Speaker, and we don't curb on them. If they want to talk of video games and depiction of black people, Mr. Speaker, firstly, we don't automatically accept that these are harms that government should curb on, but they needed to show why it's analogous to the harms in today's debate. But secondly, right, they tell us this: we must stop these groups because the government has to shape the way people think. But this is the first thing that we think was simplistic on the side of this house. They tell us the existence of these groups and the ability of them to spread rhetorics, Mr. Speaker, will somehow shape the minds of society to believe that homosexuality is something that we need to cure. We think if you really look at this group sit down, we think these groups often come from religious groups and belief groups, Mr. Speaker, which think that homosexuality is against their belief. And, Mr. Speaker, they're only trying to have a counter belief to it, Mr. Speaker. We think, firstly, if these groups already exist within society and they already adopt particular beliefs, we don't think suddenly their existence will suddenly overwhelm people's minds and say, hey, gays are bad. We think, Mr. Speaker, if these groups already exist within society, some people already are conditioned to think in a certain way, but we don't think it's exacerbated by the existence of these groups. Neither have they proved, sit down, Mr. Speaker, that the removal of these groups will necessarily change people's mindsets, especially if they are, Mr. Speaker, coming from things that are deeply rooted within individuals like religion. We don't think removing it, Mr. Speaker, will suddenly say every religion loves homosexuals either. We think what you do instead is you show that the state is taking sides within this matter, Mr. Speaker, that the state is taking the worldview of homosexuals and imposing it on every other individual within society, Mr. Speaker. We don't think that this is right either. We think a balance is achieved within status quo, Mr. Speaker. This final idea that homosexuality isn't a disease. Yes, it's not, Mr. Speaker. Ultimately, it's a choice people make, and if these groups are existent within society, Mr. Speaker, and the choice that you make are, Mr. Speaker, counterbalanced against all the views that are existent within society, we think ultimately, Mr. Speaker, it's a better choice. Go.
So what you say is that evangelical groups in the United States of America should have the right to keep on discriminating black people and show them as less valuable or less important than white people and discriminate them.
No, Mr. Speaker, you have to draw the line against sharing, Mr. Speaker, and influencing people with a worldview and actual discrimination. We don't think actual discrimination happens or exists within these groups, Mr. Speaker. You need to prove that, but you have spent your entire 7 minutes not doing that. So let's take a look at what is homosexuality, Mr. Speaker, and what is the opposition to it, and why both views are legitimate, Mr. Speaker. Because we think if you say that homosexuals have a right to exist within society, we say yes, it is a legitimate lifestyle choice. It is ultimately a preference in sexual orientation, and individuals differ in terms of what they believe, Mr. Speaker. But we think the similar approach or the similar thing that you give the rights to homosexuals, Mr. Speaker, the similar rights exist for these religious groups or belief groups that intend to cure homosexuality. Why? Because we think within this matter, Mr. Speaker, it's a matter of opposing worldviews. One person believes in one thing and the other believes in another. And in this situation, Mr. Speaker, we say it's similar. Homosexuality creates an existential threat to belief systems, and these belief systems create existential threats to homosexuality, Mr. Speaker. So what is the duty of the state to do? We think, Mr. Speaker, the duty of the state is to recognize both groups, Mr. Speaker, as legitimate beliefs and legitimate opinions, because we think ultimately, Mr. Speaker, it's just the ability for an individual to express an opinion, Mr. Speaker, and express a worldview. We think it's no different from religions per se. We think it's no different, Mr. Speaker, from allowing campaigns against lifestyle choices like smoking and drinking, which we feel, Mr. Speaker, also creates existential threats to smokers and drinkers. So we think, Mr. Speaker, what you're doing here is supporting freedom of expression across the board, Mr. Speaker, and equally within both parties. But we have to acknowledge, Mr. Speaker, that the idea of homosexuality itself within society is a disputed worldview, Mr. Speaker. What is healthiest for a disputed worldview, Mr. Speaker? We think firstly, what's healthiest is counter discourse. Because we think, Mr. Speaker, if these views exist within society anyway, it's important for these groups to exist out in the open, Mr. Speaker, where we feel there exists enough ground for homosexuals themselves, Mr. Speaker, to create the kind of counter discourse that will ultimately, at the end of the day, allow society to balance these views, Mr. Speaker. And we think this makes society more susceptible to accept both views rather than choose one over the other. Because banning it, Mr. Speaker, firstly we tell you, what it forces society to do is it forces society to choose one over the other, and we think, Mr. Speaker, this isn't healthy for such a disputed worldview. But finally we tell you, Mr. Speaker, this is a model which enhances choice, because we think sexuality isn't a disease, but sexuality is a choice that individuals make, and they can change throughout different periods of your life. The existence, Mr. Speaker, of these groups allow homosexuals who are confused within society, Mr. Speaker, to make a legitimate choice and hear the differing views, Mr. Speaker. And we think if it enhances the choice of individuals, it creates better homosexuals at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker. So for all these reasons, we're very, very, very proud to oppose.
I thank that speaker and invite the Deputy Prime Minister to the front of the House. Hear, hear.
I'll just put it here. We, contrary to the opposition, believe state does and indeed should make certain kinds of claims, what kind of preference or what kind of position about certain important issues do they prefer. We believe state has the responsibility, not only the right, to say it's bad if you discriminate black people. We believe in that case, the state says that certain kind of rhetoric is illegitimate and less worthy. We believe in this competition itself. We've seen that even if certain kind of people, like people from the main break, think that ESL and EFL people are less worthy, we believe we don't recognize that rhetoric as a legitimate one, even if the main break people don't believe in that and might oppose that and might invade our countries or whatever. And that's why we believe and we are proud to stand on the side that says certain kind of practices are illegitimate. I want to talk about three things in my speech. I want to talk about, firstly, and deal with the issue that this is a legitimate position. Secondly, I want to deal with the issue that we should not harm the right to practice to certain institutions. And here I'll contest it with an opposite harm to the individual, an individual's agency to practice his or her sexuality. And thirdly, I want to talk about the role of the state and the responsibility of the state, something that basically neatly goes into everything that we're talking about. No, thank you. So we hear from the opposition that this is a legitimate view because this mentality exists and is often basically closely interlinked with certain religious groups. But what we believe that we lacked from the opposition is basically answering Philip's points that, okay, certain religious groups also say that black people are worthy less, but still, we as the society tell tell them that this is not a legitimate view. We believe that also, not only that we need to recognize here that this isn't only a rhetoric of these religious groups, it's also a direct physical harm. It's not that they're just saying that gays are bad or gay is being illness, which is already bad and we believe should be prosecuted under hate speech. But secondly, not only that, they inflict direct harm to the individual by practicing this curing of the individual. We believe that at that point, we're not talking only about hate speech, we're talking about harmful practices to individual and to his agency. And this is what I'll be talking about at the second point. Sir.
But the harm is that you are talking about is by the will of that individual who goes to that institution by his or her consent.
This is great. So you're 18 or 16 or 20 and you live probably in an inherently discriminatory society where probably your parents are not good with you being gay, and now your parents will tell you, Sonny dear, we love you, please, because of us, go and heal yourself. State should protect the individual. State as the institution should say that certain kinds of practices are not good, and hence not even the individual, but especially this society shouldn't have the right to basically force you to go into that practice. No, thank you. And this is exactly what I'm talking about in my second point. Because they tell you, oh, but you didn't ever prove us the direct harm to the individual. But we say that once you, as the society, put choice or basically say that this might be a disease, this might be something that's, and hence your choice is not legitimate. The first harm is, it really is less likely that you as an individual will choose or will come out saying, I'm gay, I'm not gay, because you will be afraid of the society or your family saying, oh, that's not legitimate, we'll heal you now. We believe that's bad because often the most important part of the person, the individual reconciling and facing his or her situation is the family support. You will ban that, or you will basically make this less likely. Secondly, they say, oh, but we increase your agency because now you'll be able to explore your sexuality. Yeah. No, you explore your sexuality in free world, when you're not given tablets and pills and therapy shocks or electricity shocks or whatever what is happening right now. You're given a free choice when you don't have a psychiatrist that is constantly saying, you're ill, 666, change. We believe in a free society where you as an individual have the agency to maybe hear both views, that maybe homosexuality is not really the best way for you, but still you're not having always the pills and the medical treatment. We believe that is a better choice. Now, why is it a responsibility of the state? Because we believe state as such doesn't have a complete monopoly over what individuals in their society think. So we as a society still, to some extent, perceive homosexuality as a problem, as something that is obscure or abnormal behavior. And that's why many states, for example, can't legitimize or can't legalize gay marriage. However, we believe in cases where there is certain behavior, biological evidence that something that's happening in society is not true, state should intervene. We believe when we had race and gender discrimination, and when the state had the evidence that there is no biological difference between gender and state had the responsibility to intervene and basically equalize and normalize the relationship. And only later we gained majority and we gained equality within society. What's happening currently is that WHO already 2 decades ago removed homosexuality as disease from their list. We believe scientific consensus within the society is that homosexuality is not basically a disease. Hence, we believe the state as an institution should follow this and say, yes, we recognize that you as a society might discriminate, but we have evidence, and hence this should not be perceived as disease. This should be normalized. We believe state as the society needs to go and overcome discriminatory practices if they're clearly against what the science and what the reality tells us. And because our group is supporting the individual and protecting the individual and the group of homosexuals, we beg you to propose.
I thank that speaker, and I invite the deputy leader of the opposition to close out the opening half of the
I didn't realize what all the chanting before the round was for until I realized that Galatasaray is in Turkey. So Speaker, I'll do a few things in my speech. I'll answer two questions. Number one is the question of whether curing homosexuality, quote unquote, is a legitimate rhetoric and whether a liberal democratic country should tolerate such rhetorics. Second question I'll answer, Mr. Speaker, is the question of are we really forcing people to change out of their own will, and where does the state stand on that when you force someone out of their own will, naturally. And last, Mr. Speaker, we'll look at the substantive, and this in itself will go into looking at how allowing the schemes to exist doesn't really harm any sort of social norm or accepted practices. In fact, allowing them to exist enhances the social norm which exists within countries which aspire or already is a liberal democratic society. Let's answer the first question. Is curing homosexuality a legitimate rhetoric? They tell us, Mr. Speaker, that curing homosexuality is not a legitimate rhetoric, mostly because society has gone into understanding that homosexuality in itself is something which we should be tolerating in the first place. But Mr. Speaker, this is very insensitive towards the diversity of opinion which exists within many members of society. We tell you, Mr. Speaker, that curing homosexuality, or in fact homosexuality in itself, if you really want to use this logic, is already in itself an attack to those who don't believe that homosexuality should really be something which is acceptable within society. So what their claim is that we are attacking homosexuality because we allow curing homosexuality to exist, but we tell you further that if you take a step back, curing homosexuality in itself is already from the get-go an attack also to those who believe that homosexuality shouldn't be how society should progress. Sit down. So we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that if you really want to be fair and if you acknowledge that there are diverse differences in terms of worldviews and in terms of opinion, the state should then be the fair arbiter and umpire within this kind of dispute. So we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that on one hand, if you acknowledge there are stern opposition against homosexuality coming from those who believe in certain religions, and you feel that those religions in and of itself are things which necessarily we can value in a society, then why do you then preemptively clamp down on these opinions? And on the other hand, allow a prevailing opinion which is homosexuality is okay over the other. We tell him, Mr. Speaker, this is unfair, mostly to those who believe otherwise. Therefore, the best way to go, Mr. Speaker, at this particular point, is to allow both opinions to exist. Something which doesn't happen under their model. In fact, they are willing to just sweep any sort of discussion under the rug. Furthermore, we tell you, Mr. Speaker, sit down. Furthermore, we tell you that in terms of the kind of standard that we should hold in terms of the freedom of expression, they are willing to allow the state to preemptively take a stance when it comes to sexual orientation, but not when it comes to other things. If the state doesn't intervene in other personal opinions, and if the state doesn't intervene in other conflicting religion and the kind of differences that they have amongst them, why does the state then have to intervene when it comes to sexual orientation? Sit down. Because we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that again the state has to be the natural empire between these different different opinions. Which then brings this debate into an interesting halt, where they say that it's again unfair, or the reason why we really should ban it is because these private entities take it to the next level. They become increasingly harsh. They just simply kidnap someone using their ninjas and just bring them to this this kind of schemes that they have. Sit down. We tell him, Mr. Speaker, that this is definitely not the case, and if it happens, we urge these people to seek legal recourse. If your mom actively forces you to go to this scheme and you feel that you have been unjustly coerced into it, we tell you, seek legal recourse if you really want to emancipate yourself from having to go to these
to these places. But even if this is the case, we tell you that it always happens within status quo with other kinds of schemes which are intended to change lifestyles. We tell you that if you're a womanizer, your parents rain down on you to go seek help. If you're an alcoholic, that's your lifestyle, your parents and the community still rains down on you to, for you to go and seek help. The state doesn't then ban, sort of anti-alcoholic, lifestyle change schemes because they deem that, these lifestyles are different. The state allows them to happen. It's really, really up to you to decide. Yes,
Sir.
I'll take the closing.
Okay. If your parents tell you, if you're gay, get the hell out, why is that not forcing someone into therapy?
But what does that have to do with the motion to begin with? We tell you that if your parents are unreasonable, then probably you have bad parents. But the fact of the matter here remains that it is really up to your choice. We tell you that the best way is to allow that choice to be made. If you're homosexual, go ahead, we're okay. If you think you need to be cured, in the narrowest definition that they were talking about in terms of curing, we tell you that's also your choice to make. Under their model, that choice doesn't exist. You force people to just think that homosexuality is okay somehow. Sit down. And look at how allowing these schemes to exist doesn't harm social norms. In fact, it enhances social norms. But let's look at what is the social norm within liberal democratic societies, and what is the standard that we hold ourselves to. We tell him, Mr. Speaker, that the standard that we hold ourselves to is to pride ourselves in the thought that we are ready to accept everyone. This is a bit odd because I'm from Malaysia, but when I say we refer to just generally people from liberal democratic societies. But what is the high standard here? We tell you that the standard that we hold upon ourselves is very, very high. We allow the BNP, who tread on nationalism, which is teetering on fascism, to appear on a public platform, and we allow the community around this party to sort of embrace and make the choice as to whether they want to support the BNP or not. We allow religions like Islam, who want to kill the infidels, to exist, and we are willing to tolerate that in terms of expression, as long as they themselves don't go and bomb an embassy or something like that. In fact, we allow PETA to exist because they advocate animal rights to the most extreme, but we still allow these people to exist mostly because we acknowledge that their opinion matter. In fact, the evangelical example that was brought in the POI is again another example of how high the standard we put ourselves to. We allow people who have beliefs which exist contrary to us to exist within society. So, and then you ask yourself, why does the state allow and put itself to such high standard? Because we tell you the state realizes that for every lifestyle, there's always a counter lifestyle, and we should allow equal airtime for this counter lifestyle to exist. Therefore, the state's role is to become the umpire which seeks to help enhance choices in the hands of the individual. So what is the real social norm here? The real social norm here, Mr. Speaker, is for the state to be embracing towards everything and not be paternal and clamp down on lifestyle choices which you yourself deem as unreasonable, especially when those private entities don't depend on the government's help, especially when they're operating themselves. So we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that under their model, you are allowing individuals to not access that choice. You are allowing the government to be paternal and extend their paternal hands into clamping down on curing homosexuality. And we tell you that the best way to go for everyone is to have public discourse, and the only way that can happen is if you're ready to accept the person who is sitting next to you who has that different opinion. Thank you very much.
I hit that speaker and invite the member of the government.
Much better.
It's going to be dropped.
Okay. Thank you very much for the floor, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, today, second proposition does not believe that homosexuality is a disease, that there is a legitimate cure for it, but moreover, we don't believe that it is a choice that an individual should be making. Now, let's look at some of the things that we've heard, first of all, from first opposition, and then extend the case on the prop bench. We heard on basically three things. We're going to talk about limited rationality, like even if this would be a cure, or we still wouldn't want people to go for it. I'm going to talk about the concrete harm to the gays and make that link as to why it is as hate speech or racism, and I'm going to talk about a substitute for proper help to the kind of people that would suffer under their gayness. Now, let's look at some of the things, first of all, that we've heard from them. They said, well, some people are religious to the extent that they would want this themselves. We'd say, first of all, that would actually still be external pressure, and I'm going to explain why that would be bad. But second of all, I'd like to just make the generic point that I think that we don't have to put up with religion constantly, as they have done over centuries, forcing and oppressing people into views that contradict their innate ability to live, their innate desires, and act them out as they wish. And we say, put a stop to that, and make sure that when religion is a choice, but the innate experience of you being a homosexual is not a choice, we say the government, it shouldn't be an unfair arbiter, and should actually go for the innate, inherent thing that is you, and not the external pressure applied to you. No. Then we say, then they said, well, there's going to be lots of public discourse with this existence. First of all, as the existence of these cures is status quo, we don't see that mass discourse with the groups involved. We'd like to highly contest that point. But no. Secondly, we'd like to say to that, the public discourse that you would like to seek for is especially never going to exist in the kind of communities that would seek these cures in the first place, because they're closed communities, they're religious communities. Their parents forced them into these communities, into these cures, without making sure that the public discourse that they so desperately want is going to be there. So we say that's not at all going to be a viable alternative to otherwise oppressing, coercing, and bullying people into the kind of cures going against everything their identity makes them. No, thank you. Then they say, well, we should allow people to gay hate, because the actual gay hate itself, like your idea, much like PETA has an idea, or much like Islam has ideas, that should be like you should be allowed to have that idea. We say, yeah, obviously you should be allowed to be a gay hater, but what we don't want you is to actively spread that hate. What we don't want you to do is make sure that there's options in the argumentation for gay haters, and we say that's exactly where their case falls. Then they say there should be the counter lifestyle should be possible, and the government should be a fair arbiter. I say that on one side actually promotes tolerance and non-abuse and making sure that everyone gets along, and the other side has this counter lifestyle that predicates that what you are innately is a disease. I'd say the government doesn't have to be a fair arbiter. I'd say the government should actually go for the people with the innate, no thank you, desires to be homosexual and be happy as such. So that's what's their case. Now let's look at some of the things that we'd like to extend today's model on. You see, first of all, limited rationality. So, okay, for some odd reason, we kind of went into this debate in first half saying that the cures would actually do something, okay? I don't think that that's actually going to be the case. But say, okay, let's just an extension, because like we have to, let's say that they would actually help, okay? So let's say that you go into the treatment as a gay, and you come out of it as a perfectly straight, normal, non-cocktail drinking man. I say, ladies and gentlemen, that what you would then have is two reasons why you would not allow people to do that. First of all, because of limited rationality. We don't say, ladies and gentlemen, that the kind of people who would go into these cures will be able to fully and properly rationally assess either the benefits or the negative effects. The negative effects because they have no idea what they're going into the minute they tell someone, I have this identity, but I don't like it. I do think that the kind of process that they generally subjected to will be particularly harmful on a physical level, as we've heard from First Prop, but also on a psychological level. I don't think anyone will be perfectly capable of computing the extent to which it is harmful that you are told on a daily or weekly basis that what you are is a wrong thing, is a disease, and that people have a cure for that. I think no one can assess the extent to which that is harmful. Madam.
If you're saying that homosexuality is an innate thing within individuals, why can't they rationally assess what someone is telling you versus something you feel inside your heart?
Right. Well, this is the point. This is the point in time where I say you might have wanted to hear me out first, because I also think that you can't properly assess the kind of benefits as a straight man that you would potentially have, because you are not a straight man. You would have no idea to what extent the kind of identity change that you would go through would actually be to your benefit. Like the only thing you have to go by is your external pressure, your society or the community that you live in, telling you that this will be a good choice. I don't think that's the kind of basis on which we should allow people to make choices to begin with. There's no proper way in which you would assess either alternative. But then we say, ladies and gentlemen, that the cause is illegitimate. Just as we don't acknowledge contracts signed when a gun is put to your head, we don't want this to be the kind of thing to be the choice. We say that the gun to the head analogy is straight on, because the kind of social pressure, no thank you, that is experienced by these closed communities within these closed communities will be exactly akin to parents telling their children, look, you're going to do that, or we are never going to talk to you again. The existence of these exit strategies implies that it should be something that should be exited. And that's exactly why we say this is a wrong and harmful thing. We say the kind of pressure applied is there, and it is always social pressure, because you never see someone, like for example in the case of transsexuality, that is a perfectly straight heterosexual man, but then wanting to be gay. Like this is always a two-way, this is not a two-way process, it's always a one-way thing in which we say it correlates perfectly with society's desires to ungay you. And we say that's horrible. No, thank you. Then we say to concrete harm. We say, ladies and gentlemen, just to make absolutely sure, this is my second point, the first prop was well understood in an extension to this, we say that the presence of these cure on zich don't actually make sure that society widely spread hates gays. We say the one-time process of curing a gay would not do that, but we say that the presence of these the presence of these kinds of exit strategies makes that you live in a society that deems this something to be exited from, makes sure that this is considered to be something for which cure not only should be there, but also should be freely available to all who actually also believe it is a disease. And that's why we say that's where the harm comes from. That spreads gay hatred. That adds on to the argumentation of gay bashers. That makes absolutely sure that the kind of people who would tell people that it's wrong to be gay have an argumentation and could tell these people actively, go get help. And we say that's where general harm comes from. Then thirdly, we'd say this is going to be a substitute for proper help. Like, the problem in this sense is not for these people that they are gay, but that they have a problem with them being gay. This is an identity issue, not a homosexuality issue. We say those kinds of identity issues are never solved by vigorously repressing the kind of identity that these people have. What we say opposed to that, what we'd actually appreciate happening is these people getting proper help, especially in the kind of communities that you now see these people going to these kind of cures, will be the exact kind of communities where it would be far more beneficial for the individual if they were to be helped with their identity issue. If they were to be told the kind of external pressure that your religion, your priest, your mother, or your bigoted uncle makes you feel is not there, should not have been there. We think, on the end of the day, that does far more benefit for the individual than any other kind of repressive things with electrodes. Now, what we say, ladies and gentlemen, is this is not the kind of choice, given limited rationality, that we would want to make an individual make, even if it would work. We say the cause is generically illegitimate, much like the gun to the head. We say the concrete harms are massive in the fact that the society now has exit strategies for something that should not be exited. And we say this substitutes proper help, and that's exactly why I'm very proud to propose.
I thank that speaker and invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Here, here. Member of the Opposition.
Okay. We agree with the opposition that there might be some instances, ladies and gentlemen, that the state has the responsibility to intervene in some issues, but we think that in general of the cases, the state should be neutral and promote freedom of choice and expression. I'm going to talk about two things. Firstly, I'm going to talk about how this proposal will harm every single group in that society. Secondly, I'm going to deal with this issue of freedom. But first, I have quite a lot of rebuttal. Now, the proposition entire case, ladies and gentlemen, depends on this idea of, since we have family pressure on the individuals, then that decision is irrational, therefore we should ban it. The problem with that is that even if you have family pressure, we say liberty makes that person better off. Even up, maybe not fantastically off, but better off. How is that true? We say in the status quo, family says to that individual that go to that institution to be straight, or I will kill you, even if we accept the analogy that was gun to the head scheme. I'm going to kill you or get out of my house. We say at the status quo, individual has at least a chance, ladies and gentlemen, to choose between two options, even if those two options sucks, ladies and gentlemen. We say it is much better to have no option at all, ladies and gentlemen, to get the hell out of their house because of that external pressure that will still exist in their model, ladies and gentlemen, or they are going to be killed by that gun that the extension speaker is speaking about, which we don't think this is going to be fixed with this proposal. Moreover, we don't think like that's homosexual. We only see homosexual people only in oppressive groups. We say there are other people, ladies and gentlemen, who do not live in those groups, but may want to seek that kind of treatment. Extension speaker had come up with extension. He said, like, people should not, the state should be paternalistic in the cases of identity change. If we follow his logic, people shouldn't also become homosexuals, ladies and gentlemen, if they were before straight, right? Since you cannot know how it's like to be homosexual before being homosexual. We don't think that is going to help them. Secondly, he said that these clinics creates gay hatred. We say this is absurd. We say it is the first, even if we have some maniac clinics, we say it is firstly the gay hatred that creates that kind of clinic, ladies and gentlemen, not the reverse. We don't think that's legitimate. Thirdly, he said that how about that there are other things that enforce homosexual identity. We don't think like people can seek other treatments, ladies and gentlemen, including their identity change. No, thank you. Coming to my points. Firstly, why do we see harms? We have 4 things. Firstly, people can be cured, ladies and gentlemen, and we say with your model, there can be people who will do this by their free will. You do not let these people to have a meaningful life, since they are now, ladies and gentlemen, without that identity, ladies and gentlemen, that they are now seeking for. Secondly, we say, no, thank you, it is important for those groups, ladies and gentlemen, religious, whatever, to make their sense, to make their identity, ladies and gentlemen. We say the way that you express your identity is closely linked that you express the opposition for the other, ladies and gentlemen. We say if you're, for example, a Manchester Football Club, ladies and gentlemen, fan, it is very important you express the opposition for other teams in order to make, ladies and gentlemen, your own identity. We say once you do that, you are making those people unable to express themselves and self-identity. We think that's a problem. No, thank you. Thirdly, we say this is going to even make gays even worse. Why? Because if you ban certain kind of things, those groups won't say, oh, we are wrong. We say this is going to create even further resentment against gay, ladies and gentlemen, against the state and the government who looks forward for natural and equal standards for every single individual. We say this is going to make things even worse, even if you try to do it otherwise. Go.
What do you think is going to be better for the gays? The fact that the government stands up for them, or the fact that gay bashers now present this exit strategy as a tool in their...
No. The problem is, even if the state, abstractly says, I like gays and I am up for gays, we say the difference is the effects of that policy, ladies and gentlemen. We say that if the groups gets that message in a different way, then we have different outcomes, then we don't have that different kind of benefits, certainly. Fourthly, we say this is going to send the message that homosexuals are weak. They are not men. They are not as equals as other individuals, since they need some kind of state protection on them, ladies and gentlemen. We say that clearly, ladies and gentlemen, entrench the idea that those individuals are not equal as ours, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to clearly, diminish the image of homosexuals in society that clearly are. No, thank you. Second point, why do we think that it's a freedom? We say, in the case of state discrimination, true, the state should not discriminate other individuals, because every single individual and citizen owns the state. That's why we have state neutrality. But we say, in the case of private agency, no one has to, ladies and gentlemen, treat everyone equally. For example, a racist man may very well marry a white woman, ladies and gentlemen, on the basis of his race or any other thing. The reason is that the individual owns itself only, not anyone else, not the society, etc. The same thing here. Institutions owns themselves, not the state, not the gays owns that institution. For that reason, only the institution has something to say by having the things. Second point, why do we think it is tolerable to have that kind of expression? Why? Let's have an analogy. We say it is plausible to ban some kind of insult like you are ridiculously ugly, but we don't, ladies and gentlemen, ban plastic surgery, for instance, ladies and clinics, in order to cure that kind of problem, right? Because we have a benefit attached to that expression and idea. This is the same. We say even if we can have some kind of ban on things like homosexuals are all scum, but we say that expression has no benefit attached to that. In this case, this is an distinction, therefore we need it. Thirdly, we say the clinics, the criteria that the state intervention might be like, if an action creates full-scale oppression of a one group, that might be plausible in the case of black community in America. But we don't think like just because we have clinics, We don't have massive, ladies and gentlemen, threat upon gay society. We say in the cases of Western liberal democracies, people, even if they don't think like being gay is the best thing on the earth, they tolerate gay people, ladies and gentlemen. For that reason, there is no criteria to ban speech and limit speech, ladies and gentlemen, because since we have all those benefits for other groups in society, because this proposal has no benefits or practical consequence, because it is illegitimate, we are proud to oppose.
And invite the government whip to close the round for his side.
Thank you for the floor, Mrs. Speaker. First up, set up a debate in which they set 3 criteria when the state intervenes within choices. They said, first of all, if you are forced into a choice, and I will only take this one because I don't need any more. I will show you why gays are forced into these types of treatments. And therefore, I will talk about 3 things. First, I will look at the individual. I will look at what choices they are making and from what communities they come. Then I will look at the society and basically also of what type of choices are there, what is the impact of allowing these kinds of treatments, not just to the individual gays, but also to gays other places and the society as a whole. And finally, I will look at the harms that are going on. But first, the thing of rebuttal. They said, well, we don't really know if it is cured, but the hate is out there, so it is best to allow these treatments. Because apparently, once they come back from these treatments and they are not cured, they will suddenly be accepted. This is not true. Once these people go into the treatments, the communities they come from will still be there. They will still not be accepted. But the option that these communities have, saying you could have been cured, is there. And that is exactly what makes it harmful. That is exactly what leads them to perpetuate this type of idea. It could have been cured, but just because it didn't work on you makes you bad, like we see very often in religious rhetoric. No, thank you. So then into my first choice, in the individual, my first point. First up set out and said, if it is forced, then we must ban it. And I asked the POI and said, why is being forced to leave the house if you are gay not a form of forcing? Why is this a free choice if we see that these choices are made under huge pressures, especially within these religious communities, in which they are actively propagating, like they told us, that being gay is bad? We say this is a huge form of pressure, especially when you're underage and heavily dependent upon your family. You are dependent upon them. They keep telling you that being gay is bad and that if you tell them you are gay, you are a bad person. We say if you then want to come out, this is harmful because, well, you cannot be who you really want to be. We say this barrier upon self-actualization is already a harm upon the individual. We say, and if they come out, they are faced with a new choice, one that we say is bad, because what they have to do, according to their communities, is take these types of treatments. We say that is a force upon the individual, because the only way or the only reason they are doing this is because of outside pressure. Because if having the wrong sexuality is really some random event like we are being told, why are there no straight people wanting to become gay? It is not a random event. It is social pressure forcing people into treatments which are bad for them.
Sir.
It is force.
Sir.
Go ahead.
Social pressure exists whether or not these schemes exist within society. It's something you can't change. But we think if this choice empowers the child to say, Mommy, I went to the camp but I still love Tom, doesn't that empower his choice?
No, because we don't think religious communities work like this. Much like we see the rhetoric in which they say sometimes God intervenes. If he didn't, you did something wrong. We say the same thing will happen here. Because this idea that it could be cured is then perpetuated by the communities. We have this sense of authority. The priest told us, and the therapist agrees with them. Furthermore, the state didn't tell us it was wrong, so who are we to believe? Much like in debating, normal people tend to say, if it is not rebutted, I believe the one who tells me, and if I have authority, and if I have faith in that person, he must be right. We say that is still there, and that is what causes it. So on to the second point. Yes, let's go into harms, because we've heard a lot about harms. We say having these therapies there is harmful. But first of all, it is already harmful to go into these therapies. We see the type of therapies that they are very intrusive upon you. Not just because they are a psychological harm, putting barriers on your own self-actualization, actually leading you to make happy, third criteria, utility, being happy, but further of all, also that it is an infringement upon yourself. Someone is doing things to you because you've been forced into a treatment. We say this is harmful. This is a very bad thing. And just because of that, state should already intervene. If we know you are going into a treatment that you are forced into, state intervenes, much like therapy. If you want to talk about treatments and, for instance, like plastic surgery, if we can prove as a state that you were forced into plastic surgery, like for example your parents into getting a boob job or your husband, I'd like to believe that we interfere. We do so because in that case you are being harmed against your will. We say that is a bad thing. But also there's a broader harm because we say even if you're not within these communities, there is still this constant exposure to this type of thing. We say it harms the continuation and the development of the society. We say when you are continuously exposed to this, much like in hate speech, you are continuously being told that you are bad. We do not think this is a good thing, because there's a difference between the private area and the public scheme, in which we do not give someone the right to tell you you are bad and should be cured, just like First Prop told you, like racism. This type of hate speech, which in a sense it is, you are wrong and should be gone by treatment. I don't know how you want to interpret that. We say it is bad. And it harms the alternatives. We believe that the substitutes of actually helping these people and getting them as quickly as possible into the things that we really like, the self-actualization of these persons themselves, accepting they are gay and then having the life that they want, is a far better option. To allow these communities to say, you should stay here, you should get cured, and we have all these pressure means to make sure you do so, is bad to the individual. No, thank you. So then on to the society. And basically I will look at also the communities themselves. Because what we already see now is that the type of people that have this sort of free choice, as opposition wants us to believe, to go into these games, very often come from very closed off religious communities, in which there is a perception of not going against the common ideas. We say within these communities there are different opinions, but the most heard opinions are those ones of authority, are the ones with the strongest opinions, and the ones that fit the ancient traditions. Like for instance the priest telling you being gay is bad. Even if you are not, even if you disagree with that, you will still accept that because it's something you have always been told. As a state, we should make sure that the moderates get a voice as well, because even if they themselves are not capable or willing, or if you're pressured into not speaking out, states should say we are going to have this active debate and say we believe that you actually have this free choice. We believe that there is in fact this idea to go against that. And opposition already told us we want this actual debate and therefore we want this absolute free choice. No, the only way to actually have this debate going on within these communities is to have a powerful actor going against the authorities within these communities. That is why state should take a role in this and take action. So basically, if it is force, we should believe proposition. I believe I've told you. The only reason these people do so is because they are forced. There's a clear harm to the individual gay, there's a clear harm to the individual who's not within these communities, and there's a clear harm to the total perception. These communities should change. Many of them want to change, and the only way to do so is by states to take a role. For all those reasons, I beg you to propose.
I thank that speaker and invite the opposition whip to close out the round. Opposition whip. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, dear debaters, first of all, I hate when people talk about their weaknesses, but I'm having a really low blood pressure, so if anything happens, don't panic, it's okay. I have to go through this, but I'm sorry for ordering this whatsoever. I had to tell you so that you don't panic if anything happens. I will summarize this debate in two main points, ladies and gentlemen. The first point, I will talk about the freedom of expression versus forcing person to a choice, ladies and gentlemen. And I will tell you why there is a freedom that we cannot limit, that we don't have enough legitimate ground to limit this freedom of expression. And in my second point, I will make a harm-benefit analysis about if this model passes or not, ladies and gentlemen. Now, on this side of the house, we have a realistic image. Like it or not, ladies and gentlemen, there are there is a huge population, huge part of the population, which believe, according even to their religions, that people should not be gay. Even if you like it or not, yes, they will do everything to influence you. Even if you like it or not, they might put pressure on you, but on that point, if they put any physical harm whatsoever, you have other mechanisms like hate speech or body integrity whatsoever in which you can stop them, ladies and gentlemen. The problem is, please sit down. Under our world, ladies and gentlemen, this exists. I'm sorry, I like gay people, I support them, but some people don't, and they live also in this society. This exists, ladies and gentlemen. And in our world, we believe that the freedom of expression of this is still more favorable to people, to this side of the house, which says, well, people are being forced to a choice. Why, ladies and gentlemen? What don't we accept? There are two things that we don't accept when it comes to saying that person is bad, right? One, it's a hate speech, because you physically put a harm, ladies and gentlemen, to say that the other part of the society should be exterminated, and they are pressured to be violent against that society, and that is going to be encouraging people to be exterminating the other part. The second thing is discrimination by the state. Why? Because unless the state embraces everyone else, it is putting those people in a very difficult position. But ladies and gentlemen, as an individual, I can say that being gay is bad. Yes, I can say that I'm a Muslim and my world is, please sit down, based on a woman and a man getting married and living happily ever after, ladies and gentlemen. I can say that, and I can tell my gay friends, okay, you have a right thing, but, you know, it is better. Come on, why don't you give a shot at it, ladies and gentlemen? I have a right at it, as long as I'm not a member of the government forcing it as a policy against all of my citizens, making them go and attend those things, ladies and gentlemen. Please sit down, ladies and gentlemen. I have no obligation to accept these people as a friends, to like them, to support them, whatsoever, ladies and gentlemen. I only have an obligation as to not exterminate them, ladies and gentlemen. But in our current world, please sit down. We have Bible studies, right? Bible studies which manifestly say that being Muslim and being Jewish or being under any other religion is completely mad, ladies and gentlemen. And those people are going against your identity if you put your entire life being on that religion and believing on that God in that way, ladies and gentlemen, and you still let those Bible studies in those Christian-dominated communities say, no, this is the better way. Or you have a plastic surgery in which you say, you know, your nose doesn't really look good, let's change that. It might be really an offense to that person if you say that, oh, being an ugly person, I hate you, I don't want to see you. Or I am really sorry if I'm being out of order, but I'm of X nation and I don't want you because of Y nation, ladies and gentlemen. That is completely different. But you have a right to say, I like this better, and these are the reasons. Don't you agree, ladies and gentlemen? Why? Please sit down. Because, ladies and gentlemen, being gay, being part of your character, being gay is something, one, that can change. No one is certain. I'm not a certain person that I'm straight. Gay people don't always say that they are certain they are gay. This might change. I wouldn't want to be a gay person, probably gay wouldn't want to be a straight person either, but this may change, ladies and gentlemen. And this is a conflicting idea against the religion which says, no, you have to be straight, ladies and gentlemen. As long as both sides don't talk about extermination, there is a right to say what you think is right, ladies and gentlemen, and there is a right to influence the other party and right to express what you think. Like the examples that came about the PETA, the Animals Party, and the BNP, the nationalist parties, ladies and gentlemen. We do not concede, please sit down, the non-existence of social pressure, which equally exists in the Christian community with Bible studies. If you're in a Christian family, try to be a Muslim, ladies and gentlemen. There is no such